This is a story about rejection, silence, and the kind of success that doesn't ask for permission. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and this is what happened to her in her own words. 3 years ago, my 17-year-old son was escorted out of his own high school graduation by a security guard. Not because he cheated, not because he caused a fight, not because he broke any rules. He was removed because the principal decided that a homeless kid standing on stage would make the school look bad. I remember every second of it. I remember the gymnasium filled with folding chairs, the smell of floor wax and cheap flowers, the proud parents holding up their phones, the students in blue graduation gowns waiting for their names to be called. And I remember watching my son, Ethan, standing near the back entrance, while a security officer quietly told him he could not participate. I remember the look on his face, not anger, not embarrassment, something worse. The look of a kid who had gotten used to being disappointed by adults. The principal thought nobody would care. He thought removing one homeless student from a graduation ceremony would disappear by Monday morning. 3 years later, that same principal sat across a conference table from my son and asked him for help. By then, Ethan owned the school. Not a classroom, not a scholarship fund, the entire school, and the answer he gave that principal changed more lives than anyone could have imagined. Welcome back to Voice of Uncle Adam. If you've ever been judged because of where you came from instead of who you are, this story is for you. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before the headlines, before the cameras, before the school board meetings, back when we lived in a blue Honda Civic. People hear the word homeless and imagine cardboard boxes under bridges. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes homelessness looks different. Sometimes it looks like a mother and son sleeping in the parking lot behind a 24-hour grocery store. Sometimes it looks like keeping your clothes folded neatly in the trunk of a car. Sometimes it looks like brushing your teeth in a gas station restroom before school. For almost 2 years, that was our life. My husband, Michael, had owned a small construction company in Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy, just enough work to keep food on the table, enough to pay the mortgage, enough to take one family vacation every summer, enough to believe life would continue exactly that way, forever. Then one rainy November afternoon, a drunk driver crossed the center line. Everything changed in less than 10 seconds. Michael died before the ambulance reached the hospital. I was 39 years old. Ethan was 15, and suddenly every bill in America seemed determined to arrive at the exact same moment. The mortgage, the insurance, the truck payments, the medical expenses, the credit cards, the funeral. I worked 2 jobs, then 3. I sold jewelry, I sold furniture, I sold my wedding ring. I sold everything except the photographs. The photographs stayed. The bank didn't care. 9 months later, we lost the house. I still remember locking the front door for the last time. Ethan stood beside me on the porch holding a single backpack. Inside were his clothes, a laptop with a cracked screen, and a notebook filled with business ideas. I asked him if he was okay. He looked at the house, then looked at me, and smiled, actually smiled. "Mom," he said, "it's just a building." I nearly cried right there, because children aren't supposed to comfort their parents. Parents are supposed to comfort their children. But that was Ethan, always had been, even when life was trying its hardest to break him. For the first few weeks, we stayed with relatives. Then came excuses, then scheduling conflicts, then uncomfortable conversations nobody wanted to have. Eventually, we ended up in the Civic. At first, I told myself it was temporary, a few days, maybe a week, a month at most. Then winter arrived. The weeks turned into months. The months kept going. Every morning followed the same routine. Wake up before sunrise, drive to a truck stop, wash up, change clothes, eat something cheap, pretend everything was normal. Ethan never complained, not once. That almost made it harder. He kept his grades up, he kept showing up. He kept acting like our situation was just another obstacle that would eventually pass. Most kids would have fallen apart. Most adults would have, not Ethan. One night I woke up around 2 in the morning. The parking lot was quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. I noticed the glow of his laptop. He was awake. Typing? I asked what he was doing. He turned the screen toward me. A website. Simple. Ugly. Barely functional. But it worked. He had built an online platform connecting local homeowners with high school students, willing to do yard work, snow removal, dog walking, and small household jobs. He called it NeighborLink. I asked how many people were using it. He shrugged. 3. I laughed. 3 users. 3. He grinned. Yesterday it was 1. That was Ethan. Most people saw what wasn't there. He saw what could be there. Over the next year, NeighborLink slowly grew. 10 users, 50, 100, then more. Nothing spectacular, nothing life-changing, just steady growth. At school, nobody knew, or at least most people didn't. A few teachers suspected. One definitely knew. Mrs. Reynolds taught economics. She was the kind of teacher who stayed after school, helping students, long after everyone else had gone home. One afternoon, she stopped Ethan in the hallway. She handed him a paper sack. Inside was a sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. No speech, no pity, no questions. Just food. Ethan told me later that she never mentioned it again. Every Friday for the rest of the year, a paper sack appeared in her classroom. Some kindness arrives quietly. The problem with quiet kindness is that loud cruelty often gets more attention. Our principal's name was Richard Lawson. If you've ever met someone who mistakes authority for character, you already know the type. Perfect suits, perfect smile, perfect speeches. Every decision carefully calculated to improve his image. He loved talking about student success, as long as the successful students made him look good. During Ethan's senior year, NeighborLink suddenly exploded. A local newspaper featured a short article about young entrepreneurs. Someone shared it online. Investors started calling, small investors at first, then larger ones. The user base jumped from hundreds to thousands. For the first time in years, we weren't merely surviving. We could see a future, a real future. By spring, Ethan had received acceptance letters from several universities. The local media began taking interest. Teachers started bragging about him. The school posted his photo on social media. Principal Lawson suddenly became very interested in my son. Funny how success changes people's vision. One day, Lawson called Ethan into his office. He congratulated him, praised his determination, talked about how proud the school was. Then he asked if Ethan would mention the school during upcoming interviews. Ethan agreed, because that's who he was. Gracious, respectful, better than most adults. What Lawson didn't know was that the same week he was praising Ethan publicly, rumors had begun circulating about our living situation. Students talk, parents talk, people notice things. One parent discovered we didn't have an address. Another noticed Ethan often arrived unusually early and left unusually late. The whispers started spreading, and whispers eventually reached the wrong ears. 2 weeks before graduation, Ethan came back to the car, unusually quiet. That worried me immediately. He handed me a folded piece of paper, a graduation participation notice. His name had been highlighted. Underneath was a handwritten instruction. Please see principal before ceremony. No explanation, no details, just that. I told myself it was probably nothing. A scheduling issue, an award, a scholarship announcement. Something harmless. But deep down, something felt wrong, very wrong. The next morning, Ethan met with Principal Lawson. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. When he returned, his face looked pale. I asked what happened. For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then he stared out the windshield and said words I will never forget. He said the school needs to avoid distractions. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? Ethan swallowed, then finally looked at me. It means they don't want a homeless student on stage during graduation. For a moment, I genuinely thought I had misunderstood. No school official could possibly say something like that. Not in America. Not in 21st century Ohio. Not to a kid who had earned every right to stand on that stage. Then Ethan repeated exactly what Lawson had told him. The principal claimed the ceremony would attract media attention because of NeighborLink. He said reporters might discover Ethan's housing situation. He said the school wanted the focus to remain positive. Positive. As if my son were some kind of public relations problem, as if homelessness were contagious, as if poverty were something shameful. I felt anger rising so fast I could barely breathe. But Ethan surprised me. He wasn't angry. He looked tired, far older than 17, like a person who had just learned a lesson he never wanted to learn. "They're letting me graduate," he said quietly. "They just don't want me walking." I stared at him. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "No stage, no ceremony. Diploma gets mailed." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. That was the moment everything changed. Because what Principal Lawson didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that humiliating a determined young man rarely destroys his future. Sometimes it builds it. And 3 years later, every person involved would learn that lesson the hard way. The morning of graduation should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a slow humiliation unfolding in real time. I remember parking across the street from the school because we were told not to arrive too early. Those words still sting. Not too early. Not too visible. Not too much. As if my son was something that needed to be carefully managed so other people could feel comfortable. Ethan stepped out of the car, wearing his graduation gown, blue fabric, ironed the night before. He had done it himself. No complaints, no drama, just quiet determination, like always. For a moment, I let myself believe maybe things would still be normal. Maybe the principal had changed his mind. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But then I saw the security guard standing near the entrance, arms crossed, watching, waiting, and I knew something was wrong. We walked toward the building together, each step heavier than the last. The gymnasium doors were open. I could hear music inside, laughter, applause, names being called over the loudspeaker, life continuing as if nothing outside that building mattered. Ethan paused before stepping in. "Mom," he said softly, "if something happens, don't make a scene." I looked at him. My chest tightened. "Why would anything happen?" I asked. But even as I said it, I already knew the answer. Because life had been teaching him not to expect fairness. Inside, the ceremony was in full swing. Rows of students in caps and gowns, parents cheering, phones recording every moment, a celebration of achievement, at least for most people. We sat in the middle section. Ethan's name was near the end of the alphabet. We waited, and waited. Each name called felt like a countdown, not toward celebration, toward something else. Then I saw him, Principal Lawson, standing near the stage, smiling, clapping, performing, like he was the proud architect of every success story in the room. But his eyes weren't on the students. They kept drifting, toward the side entrance, toward the hallway, like he was waiting for something, or waiting for someone. Finally, a woman in a headset walked quickly toward him. She whispered something. Lawson nodded once, then looked at the security guard. And that's when I felt it, that sinking feeling in my stomach, the kind that tells you your life is about to split into before and after. The announcer's voice echoed again. Names continued, one after another, until finally, Ethan Carter Mitchell. I stood instinctively. So did he. He adjusted his gown, took one breath, and stepped forward. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Applause, cheering, phones lifting. He walked toward the stage steps, and then The security guard moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just enough. He stepped into Ethan's path and quietly said, "Stop right here." The applause didn't stop. Not at first. People thought it was part of the process. A delay, a mistake. Ethan looked confused. "So, I go up there, right?" he asked politely. The guard didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the principal. Lawson gave a small nod. That nod, that single motion, changed everything. The guard placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Not hard, but firm, controlled, and said, "You're not going on stage. You need to come with me." The gym didn't understand yet, but I did. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "What is going on?" I called out. People turned. Phones shifted toward us. Whispers began. The guard repeated himself. "Sir, you need to step aside." Ethan looked back at me. Confused, not angry, just lost. Like reality had stopped making sense. "Mom," he said quietly. And I'll never forget that sound. Because it wasn't fear. It was disbelief. Like he still thought this had to be a mistake. Like adults, don't do things this cruel on purpose. I started walking forward. But another staff member stepped in my path. "Ma'am, please remain seated." My voice cracked. "That is my son." "I understand," she said, but she didn't move. And neither did anyone else. Ethan was gently guided toward the side exit. Still wearing his gown. Still holding his honor cord. Still not understanding why achievement suddenly needed permission. The door closed behind him. Not slammed, just closed, quiet, final, and that silence. That silence is what I remember most. The ceremony continued, as if nothing had happened, as if a young man hadn't just been erased in front of hundreds of people. I followed them out. I saw Ethan standing in the hallway, under flickering fluorescent lights, still in his graduation gown, a security guard beside him, like he was a problem that needed to be contained. "What is this?" I asked again, louder this time. The guard avoided my eyes. Then the assistant principal finally spoke. "It's a decision from administration." "What decision?" I demanded. He hesitated, then said it, plainly, coldly. "The school believes it is not appropriate for him to participate in the ceremony due to concerns about public perception." Public perception. Those words. As if my son's life was a marketing issue. As if his struggle needed to be hidden so others could feel comfortable celebrating success. Ethan stood there quietly, listening, processing, not crying, not yelling, just absorbing it. Like he was trying to understand a language spoken only by people who had never suffered. Then he asked one question. Simple. Did I do something wrong? And that question broke something inside me. Because the answer was no. Absolutely no. But the system around him was built to make him feel like yes. I stepped forward. "Ethan," I said firmly, "you did nothing wrong." The assistant principal looked uncomfortable, like truth was inconvenient. "We can mail your diploma," he said quickly. "Mail it. Like a bill, like something unimportant." Ethan nodded slowly, as if he was memorizing the shape of disappointment. Then he surprised me again. He didn't argue, he didn't cry, he just said, "Okay," and walked away. Not toward anger, not toward revenge, just away. That night, he didn't talk. He sat at the edge of our car, looking at nothing, and I watched something inside him change, not break, change, like a door quietly closing, and another one somewhere far away beginning to open. I didn't know it yet. But that moment, that hallway, that silent walk away from the stage he had earned, would become the foundation of everything that came next. Because humiliation doesn't always destroy people. Sometimes, it builds something in them the world never expects. And Ethan was already starting to build. Chamuwaina. After graduation night, something shifted in Ethan. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. The way storms sometimes begin without anyone noticing, the sky has already changed. For 2 weeks after the ceremony, he barely spoke. He still got up early, still opened his laptop, still worked on NeighborLink. But something in his eyes was different now. Less hope, more focus. Like something inside him had stopped asking permission from the world and started building something the world couldn't ignore. I remember one night sitting across from him at a cheap diner just off the highway. The kind of place that never fully cleans the salt off its windows. He stirred his coffee slowly. Didn't drink it. Just watched the swirl of cream disappear. "Mom," he said finally. I looked up. "I think I understand something now." I waited. He continued. "The world doesn't reward effort. It rewards visibility." That sentence stayed with me. Because he wasn't complaining. He was calculating. For the first time, I realized Ethan wasn't just surviving anymore. He was studying people, studying systems, studying how attention moved, how money moved, how opportunity moved, and how easily it could all be controlled by the wrong hands. NeighborLink was growing, but slowly. Local towns, small communities. Nothing impressive on paper, but Ethan wasn't building it for small anymore. He was building it like he already knew where it would end up. Then came the article. A local journalist wrote a short feature titled, "Ohio Teen Builds Platform Connecting Neighbors and Students for Local Jobs." It was meant to be simple, filler content, something to fill the weekend page. But something about it caught attention. Maybe it was the timing, maybe it was the idea, maybe it was Ethan himself. Within 48 hours, the article was shared online, then reposted again. And suddenly, it wasn't local anymore, it was national. Traffic to NeighborLink tripled in a week, then multiplied again. Emails started coming in. Investors, startups, even a small venture capital firm from Chicago reached out asking for a meeting. Ethan didn't celebrate. He just kept working. Late nights, early mornings, quiet focus, like he was preparing for something bigger than anyone else could see yet. At school, things changed too. Teachers who once barely noticed him now remembered his name. Students who had ignored him suddenly became curious. Even Principal Lawson's tone shifted whenever Ethan's name came up. It was subtle at first. A compliment here, a proud mention there, but it was too late. Because the narrative had already escaped him, and Lawson didn't control it anymore. By the end of senior year, NeighborLink had over 50,000 users, then 100,000, then more. Small contractors started using it. Local businesses started relying on it. Students across multiple states began signing up. Ethan was no longer just a student. He was becoming something else entirely. But at home, he was still just my son, still quiet, still thoughtful, still the boy who once told me, "It's just a building," when we lost our house. One evening I found him staring at old school emails, the ones from administration, from guidance counselors, from Principal Lawson, all carefully saved. I asked him why. He didn't answer right away. Then he said something I didn't fully understand at the time. "I want to know how people justify what they do." That was the moment I realized. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet, not directly. It was about understanding systems, power, control, and how easily they can fail the people they are supposed to protect. A few months later, NeighborLink caught the attention of a regional tech accelerator. They offered Ethan a meeting in Columbus. I remember driving him there. The building was glass, steel, everything clean and expensive, everything opposite of our life. Inside, people in tailored suits shook his hand like he was already important. They spoke in numbers, projections, scaling strategies, monetization. Ethan listened carefully, asked questions, very precise questions. And for the first time, I saw adults in a room, unsure how to answer a teenager. At the end of the meeting, one of them said, "We'd like to invest." Another added, "Early-stage valuation could be significant if growth continues." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He looked at me, just briefly, then back at him, and said, "No." The room went quiet. The investor blinked. "Excuse me." Ethan stood up slowly. "I'm not building this to sell it." He paused, then added, "I'm building it to control it." We left without a deal. In the car, I finally asked him what he meant. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I don't trust people who only see value when something can be owned," he said. That night, I couldn't sleep, because I realized something uncomfortable. My son wasn't just reacting to what had happened at graduation. He was learning how the world worked and deciding how to move through it differently. Meanwhile, at Westfield High School, things were not going well. Funding cuts, declining enrollment, budget issues. The same school that once controlled who got to stand on its stage was now struggling to keep programs alive. And quietly, almost invisibly, NeighborLink was becoming a tool many students in the district were using for income, odd jobs, weekend work, real money, real independence. Ethan never advertised it to the school. He didn't need to. The system was spreading on its own. And then came the call. A message from a number Ethan didn't recognize. He answered on speaker. A man introduced himself as a consultant working with the school district. He said they were exploring community partnership opportunities. Then came the real request. They wanted a meeting with Ethan about NeighborLink. And as the conversation ended, I watched my son's expression change again. Not surprised, not emotional, just still, like something he had been expecting had finally arrived. He closed his phone, looked at me, and said quietly, "They're late." And I didn't ask what he meant, because I think I already knew. The people who once decided he didn't belong on a stage were now preparing to ask him for something they couldn't afford to lose. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Ethan was still asleep. I was making coffee when his phone buzzed again, and again, and again. 3 missed calls in less than 5 minutes, then a voicemail, then a text message. I remember staring at the screen, noticing something strange. The number had an official district code. Not a student, not a parent, something higher. When Ethan finally woke up, I handed him the phone, without a word. He listened to the voicemail in silence. No reaction at first. Just that same stillness he had learned after graduation. Then he set the phone down. "They want a meeting," he said. "With the school board." I asked, "About what?" He shrugged slightly. "NeighborLink." But there was something in his voice now. Something measured, like he already knew this wasn't just a meeting request. It was a correction. A system realizing too late that it had lost control of something it once dismissed. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in a conference room at Westfield District Headquarters. Same district that had once decided Ethan shouldn't stand on a graduation stage. Now everything was different. The table was long, polished wood, water bottles placed neatly in front of each seat. 5 administrators, 2 legal advisors, 1 consultant, and Principal Richard Lawson. The same man who had once smiled while my son was quietly escorted out of his own graduation. He looked older now, not wiser, just tired. Like success had finally stopped protecting him. Ethan sat across from them, calm, composed, not a student anymore, not even really a guest. Something else. Something they hadn't fully understood yet. The meeting began with formalities, district budgets, technology gaps, student employment challenges. Then the consultant leaned forward. "We've been studying platforms that connect students with local work opportunities," he said carefully. "We believe NeighborLink could be integrated into district initiatives." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He just listened. Let them talk. Let them build their case. Then finally, he asked one question. Simple. How many students in your district are currently using it? The consultant hesitated. Thousands, he admitted. Ethan nodded. And how many of those students were previously struggling financially? Another pause. Most of them. Ethan leaned back slightly. And how many of those students did you support before they found it? Silence. That silence said everything. Principal Lawson shifted in his seat, cleared his throat. Ethan, he said carefully, we are here to discuss partnership, not history. Ethan looked at him for the first time, directly, calmly. That's funny, he said, because history is exactly why I built it. The room tightened. You could feel it, like air being pulled out slowly. Lawson tried again. We want to ensure this platform is used responsibly. Ethan nodded slowly. I agree. Then he added, which is why I never gave you control over it. One of the advisors interjected. Surely there's a way for the district to... Ethan raised a hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough to stop the sentence mid-air. No, he said, and that single word changed the tone of the entire room. He continued, this platform was created because your system failed students like me. He paused, then added, quieter now. You don't get to fail people and then ask to manage the solution they built to survive you. Lawson's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Not this time. Because something had shifted. Ethan was no longer the student who had been removed from a stage. He was the one holding leverage now. The consultant tried one last time. We're prepared to offer compensation for integration rights. Ethan looked at him, almost curiously. How much? The consultant named a figure, a large one, the kind of number that usually ends conversations in excitement. But Ethan didn't react. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. I'm not selling it. A pause. Then he added, but I will tell you what I will do. Everyone in the room focused now, even Lawson. Ethan continued. I will allow your students continued access. As long as it remains independent. As long as no administrator controls it. And as long as no student is ever removed or penalized for using it. The consultant frowned. That's unusual. Ethan nodded. I know. Then he looked at Lawson again. For clarity, he said, this is not a negotiation. It was quiet after that. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Lawson finally leaned back. His voice was lower now. Why are you doing this? He asked. The question wasn't professional anymore. It was personal. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked down at the table, then up again, and when he spoke, his voice was steady. Because I remember standing outside your gymnasium door, he said, and being told I was a distraction. A pause. I remember being told my life didn't belong on your stage. Another pause. And I remember deciding that if I ever built something important, it would never ask permission from people like you again. The room went completely still. Lawson looked down for a moment. Just a moment. Then back up. But something had changed in his expression. Not pride, not defense. Something closer to recognition. Like he finally understood what had been growing outside his control for years. The meeting ended without celebration, without agreement, just understanding and boundaries. Outside the building, the air felt different, lighter. Ethan didn't speak until we reached the car. Then he said something I didn't expect. They think this is about money, he said. I asked, isn't it? He shook his head. No. It was never about money. He paused. It was about never being invisible again. That night I watched him working on his laptop again. Lines of code, Messages, updates, but this time it felt different. Like everything he was building had finally connected to something bigger than anger, bigger than pain, something structured, controlled, intentional, not destruction, not revenge, something far more permanent. Redesign. And, somewhere without saying it out loud, I realized the truth. The school never lost a student that day at graduation. They created something far more powerful. They created someone who understood exactly how systems ignore people, and how systems can be rebuilt without them. The email arrived on a Friday morning. Short, urgent, no subject line that suggested panic. But the tone said everything. Westfield School District was in financial crisis. Deep budget cuts, program shutdowns, staff reductions, and a possible state-level audit due to unusual funding inconsistencies. I remember Ethan reading it at the kitchen table. No reaction at first, just stillness. Then he closed the laptop and said something I didn't fully understand until much later. "They're collapsing," he said quietly. Not proudly, not excited, just factual, like he had been tracking this outcome for a long time. And now, it had finally arrived. 2 weeks later, the school board announced an emergency public session. Open to parents, open to staff, open to media, and unusually, open to former students. Ethan didn't tell me he was going at first. I only found out when I saw him standing near the doorway of the auditorium that evening. No suit, no performance. Just a simple dark jacket, calm eyes, and a presence that didn't need introduction anymore. The room was full, uncomfortable, whispering, tension everywhere. Principal Lawson sat at the front table with other administrators. But he looked smaller now, not physically, just diminished, like authority only exists as long as people believe in it. The meeting began with numbers, deficits, losses, cuts. Then came the silence, and finally the district superintendent spoke. "We are exploring restructuring partnerships," he said. That was when Ethan stood up. No hesitation, no announcement, just movement. And every head turned. Some people recognized him immediately. A murmur spread through the room. "That's him! The NeighborLink guy. He built that platform." Lawson's face tightened the moment he saw him. Ethan walked forward slowly. Not to the stage, not to the podium, just to the center aisle, where everyone could see him clearly. He stopped, looked around the room, and spoke. "I was a student in this district," he said. His voice was calm, but carried. "I was told I didn't belong on your stage." A pause. "I was removed from my own graduation because someone decided my situation would be a distraction." The room shifted. Uncomfortable now, listening harder. Ethan continued. "But I didn't disappear." Another pause. "I built something instead." He turned slightly. Not toward the board, toward everyone. Students, parents, teachers, media. "All of you are now using something created by the same student you once tried to quietly remove." The room went still, completely still. Lawson finally stood. His voice cracked slightly. "Ethan, this isn't the place." But Ethan looked at him. Not angrily, not loudly, just firmly. "This is exactly the place." Silence again. Then Ethan said something no one expected. "I didn't come here for revenge." A pause. "I came here for accountability." He reached into his pocket and placed a folded document on the table in front of the board. A full audit summary, public data, student usage metrics, impact reports, and funding discrepancies tied to outsourcing attempts made without student consent. The superintendent flipped through it, slowly, face tightening. Lawson sat down, very slowly. Because now it was no longer about emotion, it was about evidence. Ethan continued. "This district failed students financially, structurally, and ethically." Another pause. But the students adapted anyway, and that adaptation became stronger than your system. He looked directly at Lawson now. For years, he said quietly, you believed control meant leadership. A pause. But leadership is what happens when control is gone, and people still manage to survive. The room was silent. Even the cameras weren't moving. Lawson finally spoke again, barely audible. What do you want from us? Ethan didn't hesitate. Nothing you can give me. That landed hard. Then he added, but I'll tell you what I want for the students who come after me. He turned slightly toward the superintendent. No student should ever be removed from recognition because their life makes an adult uncomfortable. A pause. No student should ever be hidden for public image. Another pause. And no system should ever forget that the people inside it are not problems to be managed. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was listening. Real listening. After a long pause, the superintendent nodded slowly. We agree, he said quietly. And for the first time, the system didn't argue. It absorbed. Later that night, as we walked out of the building, Lawson was waiting near the exit. Alone, no staff, no shield of authority. Just a man who had finally run out of versions of himself that could explain what happened. He looked at Ethan for a long moment, then said quietly, You changed everything. Ethan paused, then replied, No. You did. A long silence followed. Then Lawson nodded once, not defensively, not proudly, just acknowledging, and for the first time since graduation night, there was no power left in the space between them, only understanding. A year later, NeighborLink was adopted statewide in multiple districts, not owned by schools, not controlled by administrators, but used independently by students who needed it most. Ethan never became loud about it, never turned it into a spectacle. He just kept building, quietly, carefully, the way people build things they believe should have existed, long before they arrived. And me. I still think about that graduation day sometimes. The hallway, the silence, the door closing, because I understand now something I didn't understand then. They didn't remove my son from a stage. They redirected his entire future, and in trying to erase him, they built the very reason the system had to change. And if I've learned anything from all of this, it's that some people are not broken by rejection. They are refined by it, stronger, clearer, impossible to ignore twice.